You're standing at the edge of time itself 30,000 years ago watching something extraordinary unfold. A curious hunter named Grok approaches a mushroom that pulses with otherworldly green light. His fingers hover above its cap. You can sense his wonder, his fatal curiosity mixing with ancient caution. What happens next will echo through caves and campfires for generations. This is the moment humanity first stumbled upon nature's hidden pharmacies. When laughter became a drug and reality became negotiable. Tonight, you'll witness how it shaped us, how it bound communities together and tore them apart, how our ancestors learned the first bitter lessons about transcendence and survival. If this sounds intriguing, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries. Sharing helps others find these ancient stories too. But now let yourself sink deeper into this prehistoric world where you'll experience firsthand the day our ancestors accidentally invented getting high. Take a breath. Feel yourself settling into warm furs as the last embers cast dancing shadows on cave walls. You are safe here in this place between worlds, between wake and sleep. Let the story wash over you like gentle waves. You open your eyes to find yourself in a time when the world was younger, wilder, and infinitely more mysterious. The morning air fills your lungs with the crisp taste of untouched earth and dew-heavy grass. You're part of a small band of hunter-gatherers, about 30 souls who've made their temporary home in a shallow cave overlooking a valley that stretches endlessly toward distant purple mountains. The cave mouth yawns behind you, its rough limestone walls blackened by countless fires decorated with the handprints of your people, some fresh and red with ochre, others faded to ghostly outlines. Your sleeping furs still hold the warmth of the night, woven from the hides of mammoth and deer, soft as clouds beneath your back. You stretch, feeling the pleasant ache in muscles that know honest work, the burn of hauling water from the stream, the satisfaction of stones shaped into tools, the deep tiredness that comes from a life lived in harmony with the rhythms of sun and season. Your people don't have names for the complex emotions you feel, but your heart understands them perfectly. Belonging, purpose, the quiet contentment of knowing your place in the great web of existence. The morning sounds of your tribe begin to stir around you. Old Mina, the grandmother whose weathered hands know every useful plant, within a day's walk, is already up her bone jewelry clicking softly as she tends to the fire. The sound is like distant rain on leaves, rhythmic and soothing. She hums tunelessly while she works a habit that has comforted your people through countless dawns. Young Kyle, barely old enough to hunt with the men, sits near the cave entrance napping flint. The sharp crack of stone on stone punctuates the morning like a primitive percussion, each strike deliberate and practiced. His tongue peeks out slightly as he concentrates, and you can't help but smile at his earnestness. He's trying so hard to prove himself worthy of joining the hunt parties. Your stomach rumbles gently, and you catch the warm, smoky scent of roasted roots and herbs drifting from Mina's cooking area. She's boiling water in a large gourd, the steam carrying hints of wild onions and bitter greens. The smell triggers a memory your mother teaching you which plants to avoid her voice, serious as she pointed to the bright berries that meant death, the lovely flowers that brought madness. Trust the old knowledge, she had said, her fingers gentle on your small chin. What our mothers and grandmothers learned, they learned with their lives. How prophetic those words seem now as you're about to witness your people discover knowledge that will reshape their understanding of reality itself. You rise and pad barefoot to the cave entrance, your feet finding the worn grooves in the stone where thousands of footsteps have passed before. The morning sun paints the valley in shades of gold and green, and you can see the river winding like a silver snake through stands of ancient oak and elm. Herds of aurochs, the massive wild cattle that your people both fear and revere, graze in the distant meadows, their dark shapes moving slowly against the grass. This is your world, predictable, dangerous, beautiful, and utterly dependent on the wisdom passed down through generations. Today, That wisdom will be tested in ways your ancestors never imagined. Brom, the best tracker in your band, emerges from the cave behind you. His movements are fluid, economical, like those of the wolves your people both compete with, and occasionally tame. His eyes are the color of river stones, constantly scanning, constantly alert. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of someone who has led successful hunts through the darkest winters. And the mammoth herd moved north yesterday, he says, settling beside you on a sun-warmed boulder. But there are deer signs near the mushroom grove. Good hunting today. The mushroom grove. Your pulse quickens slightly, though you don't yet understand why. Something about that place has always felt different. Electric. As if the air itself holds secrets. Mena calls from the fire, her voice carrying the warm authority of someone who has fed hungry people for 40 winters. Come eat. The day is long and empty bellies make poor decisions. You join the circle around the fire, accepting a wooden bowl filled with rich, nourishing broth. The warmth spreads through your chest, and you can taste the complexity of flavors, wild leeks, bitter dandelion leaves the richness of marrow from yesterday's successful hunt. Your people eat in comfortable silence, the crackling of the fire creating a gentle soundtrack to the meal. As you eat, you watch the interplay of personalities around the fire. There's Zara, quick-witted and always ready with a joke, her laughter like the sound of water over stones. Next to her sits Tom, steady and reliable, the kind of person who notices when someone needs help and simply provides it without fanfare. The children cluster around Mena, their eyes wide, as she tells them about the various plants they'll encounter during the day's gathering. This is more than a meal, it's a ritual of connection, a daily weaving of the social bonds that keep your small band alive in a world full of predators and unpredictable weather. The warmth of the fire on your face, the rich taste of the broth, the soft murmur of voices, all of it combines to create a sense of deep security. But today, this security will be tested by discoveries that will challenge everything your people think they know about the world and their place in it. The sun has climbed to its zenith when Brom leads the hunting party toward the mushroom grove. You're part of the group, 6 hunters moving in the quiet, purposeful way your people have perfected over millennia. Your feet find the softest spots on the forest floor, automatically avoiding the dry twigs and rustling leaves that might alert prey to your presence. The forest here is ancient, with massive oaks whose trunks would take 10 people holding hands to encircle. Shafts of golden sunlight pierce the canopy, creating pools of warmth that feel like blessings from the sky's spirits. The air is thick with the green smell of growing things, rich earth, and the faint musk of the animals whose paths you're following. You've been walking for perhaps an hour when Grok suddenly stops. He's always been curious, sometimes foolishly, so with the kind of restless intelligence that drives him to investigate everything he encounters. His dark eyes are fixed on something just off the main deer trail.
Look! He whispers, his voice carrying the excitement of discovery.
You follow his gaze and see them, a cluster of mushrooms unlike any you've encountered before. They're growing in a perfect fairy ring around the base of an enormous dead tree, its bark white with age and soft with decay. But these aren't the familiar brown caps that Mena teaches the children to gather for the evening stew. These mushrooms seem to pulse with their own inner light, a soft green luminescence that becomes more apparent as your eyes adjust to the forest shadows. Brom approaches cautiously, his hunting spear held loosely, but ready. In your world, anything unusual might be dangerous, and survival depends on treating the unknown with respect and wariness. But even he seems mesmerized by the gentle glow emanating from the mushroom caps.
I've never seen their like, he murmurs, crouching down to examine them more closely. They're beautiful.
And they are beautiful in an otherworldly way that makes your pulse quicken with a mixture of wonder and unease. The caps are a deep, rich brown, but shot through with veins of silver that seem to move and shift in the dappled forest light. The stems are pale and sturdy, and when a gentle breeze stirs through the grove, the mushrooms seem to chime softly, like distant bells. Grok reaches out one calloused finger to touch the nearest cap, and you hold your breath. The moment his skin makes contact with the mushroom, it pulses brighter, as if responding to his presence. The green light spreads through the entire ring, and for a moment the grove is filled with an ethereal radiance that transforms the ordinary forest into something magical. "It's warm," Grok says, wonderingly. "Like it's alive in a way that's more than alive." The other hunters gather around, their faces filled with the same mixture of awe and caution. In your culture, such phenomena are often interpreted as messages from the spirit world, signs that require careful consideration and respect. Tam, the eldest of your group, touches the small bone charm he wears around his neck.
"The forest spirits are showing us something," he says quietly. "But what?"
You feel a strange pull toward the mushrooms, as if they're calling to something deep in your consciousness. The rational part of your mind warns you to be careful, but another part, the part that dreams of flying with eagles and swimming with fish, yearns to understand what secrets these glowing fungi might hold. Grok, impulsive as always, makes the decision for all of you. Before anyone can stop him, he plucks one of the smaller mushrooms from the ring and examines it closely. The remaining mushrooms dim slightly, as if mourning the loss of their companion. "Grok, no," Brom starts to say, but the young hunter has already bitten into the mushroom cap. The taste, he tells you later, is unlike anything he's ever experienced. Earthy and rich, yes, but with undertones of copper and starlight, if such things could have flavors. The texture is firm but yielding, and as he swallows, he feels a warmth spreading through his chest that has nothing to do with the afternoon sun. For several minutes, nothing happens. The hunting party continues to stare at the remaining mushrooms, and Grok shrugs apologetically, as if embarrassed by his impulsiveness. You're about to suggest moving on when you notice something odd about his expression. His eyes, normally dark brown, seem to be reflecting more light than they should. His pupils have expanded until they're like deep pools, and there's a smile playing at the corners of his mouth that you've never seen before, dreamy, distant, as if he's listening to music that only he can hear.
"I feel," he begins, then stops, his head tilting to one side, as if straining to catch a faint sound. "I feel like the trees are singing."
The words send a chill down your spine. Trees don't sing, everyone knows that. But as you watch Grok's face transform with wonder, as you see him begin to sway gently to some unheard rhythm, you begin to question what everyone knows. He turns to face the ancient oak beside the mushroom ring, and his expression becomes one of absolute delight. "Hello, old friend," he says to the tree, his voice soft with affection. "I never knew you were so beautiful. This is not normal behavior." Grok has always been playful, but this goes beyond playfulness into something unprecedented. He reaches out to touch the oak's bark, and when his palm makes contact, he laughs, a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy that seems to bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. The laughter is infectious in a way that disturbs you. Part of you wants to laugh too, though you have no idea why. Part of you wants to back away, to return to the safe, predictable world of the hunting trail. But the largest part of you is fascinated by this transformation in your companion. Grok begins to move in a way that's both familiar and utterly foreign. It's almost like the ritual dances your people perform around the fire during celebrations, but more spontaneous, more individual. His arms weave patterns in the air, and his feet find a rhythm that seems to match some cosmic heartbeat. His face is radiant with happiness, and when he looks at you, it's as if he's seeing you for the first time. "You're glowing," he tells Brom with absolute conviction. "We're all glowing. How did I never notice before?" Brom's weathered face is creased with concern, but there's also curiosity there. As the leader of this small expedition, he's responsible for everyone's safety, but he's also pragmatic enough to recognize that Grok doesn't seem to be in any immediate danger. If anything, he appears healthier and more vibrant than before.
"How do you feel?" Brom asks carefully.
Grok considers this question with the gravity of a shaman consulting the spirits. "I feel like I understand things," he says finally. "Important things like why the wind sounds different in oak leaves than in pine needles. Like why the deer choose certain paths through the forest. Like why we dream. These are not the kinds of thoughts that usually occupy a hunter's mind during a successful expedition. Your people are practical, focused on the immediate needs of survival and community. But there's something compelling about the way Grok speaks, as if he's accessing a deeper layer of reality that's always been there waiting to be discovered. As the afternoon progresses, Grok's behavior continues to be unlike anything you've witnessed. He finds profound significance in the pattern of bark on trees, in the way shadows fall across the forest floor, in the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. He speaks to plants and stones as if they're old friends, and somehow his absolute conviction makes it seem almost reasonable. When it comes time to return to camp, he walks among you, but also apart, occasionally stopping to examine something that catches his enhanced attention, a particularly interesting rock, a play of light through leaves, the intricate architecture of a spider's web. His presence has become simultaneously more vivid and more mysterious. The other hunters exchange glances filled with questions for which they have no answers. What has happened to Grok? Is this a blessing from the forest spirits, or something more dangerous? And most importantly, what do they tell the rest of the tribe? As you walk the familiar path back toward the cave, you can't shake the feeling that everything has changed, even though the forest looks exactly the same as it did this morning. Grok's laughter echoes through the trees, and you find yourself wondering what he's seeing, that you're missing what songs he's hearing that remain silent to your ears. The mushroom grove fades behind you, but its memory lingers like the afterimage of lightning. You know with the certainty that comes from deep instinct that your people will return to that place. The question is no longer if, but when and what other secrets those glowing fungi might reveal. 3 days have passed since Grok's encounter with the glowing mushrooms. The story has spread through your small band like ripples on still water, growing and changing with each telling. Some people whisper that he was touched by forest spirits. Others wonder if he's been cursed. Grok himself has returned to normal, though he carries a distant look in his eyes sometimes, as if remembering songs only he can hear. Today you're part of a gathering expedition led by Mina, whose knowledge of edible and useful plants could fill volumes if your people had such things. The morning is crisp and clear, with the kind of autumn light that makes everything seem sharper, more defined. Frost glitters on the grass like scattered diamonds, and your breath creates small clouds that dissipate quickly in the warming air. Your gathering basket is woven from supple willow branches, and it bumps gently against your hip as you follow Mina and the others through the meadowland beyond the river. The basket already holds a small treasure of late-season berries, their deep purple skins dusted with the silver bloom that speaks of perfect ripeness. Your fingers are stained with their juice, sweet and slightly tart, and your mouth still holds their flavor. Mina moves with the purposeful efficiency of someone who has spent decades learning to read the landscape. She points out the subtle differences between plants that look similar but serve different purposes. This one for healing. Cuts, that one for calming upset stomachs, another that makes excellent cordage when dried and twisted. Her voice is patient and warm as she shares knowledge that has kept your people healthy for generations. Always taste just a little first. She reminds the younger members of the group, her weathered hands gentle, as she demonstrates proper harvesting technique. Plants can be generous, but they can also be protective of their secrets. You're following a game trail that winds along the edge of a small forest when Zara makes a discovery that will echo through your tribe's oral history for generations to come. She's always been observant, quick to notice details that others miss, and her sharp eyes catch sight of something unusual growing in the dappled shade beneath a stand of hazelnut trees. "Look at these leaves!" She calls, her voice bright with curiosity. You gather around to see what she's found, a low-growing plant with broad serrated leaves that seem almost ordinary at first glance. but there's something about them that draws the eye, a subtle difference in color and texture that suggests they're somehow special. The leaves are a deep green with silver undersides, and when the wind moves through them, they create a soft, whispering sound that's almost musical. Mina approaches cautiously as she approaches all unfamiliar plants. Her experienced fingers don't touch, but she leans close to examine the leaf structure, the way the plant grows, the soil conditions it prefers. Years of experience have taught her to be respectful of the unknown. "I don't recognize these," she admits, and there's wonder in her voice. Mina knows virtually every plant within a day's walk of your camp. To find something completely new is extraordinary. Young Kira, barely old enough to join the gathering expeditions, reaches out to touch one of the leaves. "They're soft," she reports, rubbing the leaf between her thumb and forefinger. "And they smell interesting." The scent that rises from the crushed leaf is complex and compelling, green and fresh, but with undertones of something else, something that makes your mouth water slightly and your thoughts seem to sharpen. It's not unpleasant, exactly the opposite. There's something about the smell that makes you want to experience more of it. Zara, emboldened by Kira's success, plucks a single leaf and examines it closely. The plant doesn't seem to object to this small harvest. If anything, the remaining leaves seem to rustle with something that might be approval. She brings the leaf to her nose and inhales deeply. "It makes my head feel clear," she says, surprising herself with the observation. "Like when you've been inside the cave too long and then step out into fresh air." The comparison resonates with everyone in the group. You all know that feeling, the sudden expansion of awareness that comes with moving from enclosed spaces into the open world. But how could a simple leaf create a similar sensation? Intrigued by this strange property, Zara makes a decision that will change everything. She places the leaf in her mouth and begins to chew, slowly and thoughtfully. The plant fibers break down easily between her teeth, releasing more of that compelling scent and a flavor that's surprisingly pleasant, bitter at first, like many medicinal plants, but with a sweet aftertaste that lingers. For several minutes, nothing seems to happen. The gathering expedition continues its work, with Mina guiding the group toward a patch of wild turnips she spotted earlier. Baskets fill with the bounty of late autumn roots and seeds, dried berries, medicinal herbs that will help the tribe survive the coming winter. But gradually you begin to notice changes in Zara. Subtle at first, a brightness in her eyes and animation in her movements that seems slightly heightened. She's always been talkative, but now her words come faster, tumbling over each other in her eagerness to share every thought that enters her mind. "The turnips are so beautiful," she says, holding up a freshly dug root. "Look at how the earth clings to them like it doesn't want to let them go. And the way the light catches the dirt, it's like tiny stars, isn't it? Everything is so much today." The other gatherers exchange glances. This level of enthusiasm about turnips is unusual even for Zara, but she's clearly not distressed or in danger, so they continue their work while keeping a careful eye on her. As the morning progresses, Zara's chattiness increases to remarkable levels. She provides a running commentary on everything she observes, the way spiderwebs catch dewdrops like jeweled nets, the intricate patterns in tree bark, the musical quality of bird calls that she's never noticed before. Her observations are actually quite insightful, but their volume and intensity are unprecedented. "I just realized," she announces to the group as they work near a small stream, "that water sounds different depending on what it's flowing over. Listen, over the smooth stones it's like whispers, but where it hits those jagged rocks it's more like laughter. How have I never heard this before?" Mina pauses in her root gathering to really listen, and she has to admit that Zara is right. The water does make different sounds as it navigates different obstacles. It's the kind of observation that their people value, practical knowledge about the natural world, but delivered with an intensity that's both charming and slightly overwhelming. By midday, when the gathering party stops to rest and share the meal of dried meat and berry cakes they brought with them, Zara has barely paused for breath. She's connected observations about plant growth to theories about weather patterns linked the behavior of insects to the changing seasons, and developed elaborate explanations for why certain flowers bloom in specific colors. "I think the plants talk to each other," she declares, settling beside the stream with her portion of the midday meal. Not with words, obviously, but through their roots and through the air. That's why some areas of the forest feel peaceful and others feel restless. The plants are having conversations and we can sense the mood even if we can't understand the words. This idea would normally be dismissed as fanciful, but there's something about Zara's current state that makes everything she says seem plausible, even profound. Her usual quick wit has been amplified into something approaching insight, and her observations about the natural world are genuinely illuminating. Kira, inspired by Zara's transformation, decides to try chewing one of the mysterious leaves herself. The older members of the gathering party are too cautious to object strongly. After all, Zara seems healthy and happy, more engaged with the world than ever before. The effect on Kira is similar but distinct. Where Zara became a fountain of observations about the natural world, Kira becomes fascinated by the social dynamics of their little group. She notices subtle patterns in how people interact, the ways that unspoken communication happens through gesture and expression. Mina touches her bone necklace when she's thinking hard, Kira announces with delight. And Jorik always checks the wind direction before he speaks, like he's making sure his words will travel in the right direction. We all have these little habits that are like signatures of our spirits. Soon, Kira and Zara are engaged in an animated conversation about everything and nothing, their voices weaving together in a harmony of excitement and discovery. They talk about the texture of tree bark, the mathematical precision of spider webs, the emotional expressions of horses, the way sunlight has different qualities at different times of day. Their enthusiasm is infectious. Even the most cautious members of the gathering party find themselves drawn into conversations that range far beyond the usual practical concerns of daily life. The mysterious leaves seem to have unlocked a capacity for wonder and philosophical speculation that normally remains dormant in people focused on survival. When it comes time to return to camp, Zara and Kira are still talking, their voices bright with discovery and connection. They've formed a bond of shared experience that seems deeper than ordinary friendship, and their excitement about their new perspective on the world shows no signs of diminishing. The mysterious leaves remain where Zara found them, rustling innocently in the autumn breeze. But now they carry the promise of more adventures in consciousness, more opportunities to see the familiar world through transformed eyes. As your gathering party makes its way back toward the cave, you can't help but wonder what will happen when Zara and Kira share their experience with the rest of the tribe. Will others want to try these remarkable leaves? And if they do, what new insights might emerge from minds freed to explore thoughts and connections that usually remain hidden? The afternoon sun slants through the trees, casting long shadows that seem to dance with possibility. 2 weeks have passed since the discovery of the talking leaves, and your tribe has settled into the rhythm of early winter preparation, with the kind of focused intensity that comes when survival depends on completing essential tasks before the first serious snowfall makes outdoor work impossible. The nights are longer now, filled with the sound of wind whistling through bare branches and the distant howl of wolves claiming their territory in the darkness beyond the circle of light cast by your cave fires. Inside the cave, the perpetual fire burns brighter than it does during the warmer months, its flames reaching higher and its warmth extending farther as it becomes not just a source of heat and light, but the very center around which your entire community organizes itself during the dangerous months ahead. The massive bones that will become needles, scrapers, and weapon points are stacked near the cave entrance like a stockpile of raw materials waiting to be transformed into the tools that will make the difference between life and death when resources become scarce. The rich smell of roasting meat fills the air with the promise of abundance that has followed a successful mammoth hunt, the kind of victory that provides not just immediate nourishment, but insurance against the lean months ahead. The massive creature's death was not taken lightly. your people honored its spirit with ceremony and gratitude before beginning the complex process of transforming its body into everything needed for winter survival. Tonight is special, a celebration of the successful hunt that has provided meat, hide, and tools through the darkest months ahead, but also an acknowledgement of the changing season and the need for your people to draw closer together as the cold world outside becomes more hostile and less forgiving. The fire pit has been expanded for the occasion, surrounded by carefully selected stones that can withstand the intense heat without cracking, creating a focal point that can accommodate the entire tribe in a single circle. You're sitting in that circle now, your belly pleasantly full from the feast that began at sunset and continued until every member of your community had eaten their fill of rich mammoth meat roasted with wild herbs and roots. The satisfaction of a full stomach is something your people never take for granted, knowing that hunger is always a possibility in a world where the next meal depends on successful hunting and favorable weather. The fire is larger than usual tonight, built up with extra wood to mark the occasion, and fed with a variety of materials that create different qualities of flame and smoke. Jorik, who tends the fires with the dedication of someone who understands their crucial importance to community survival, has been feeding the flames with a careful selection of materials throughout the evening: oak branches for steady heat, and long-lasting coals, pine needles for their pleasant scent, and the way they create quick, bright flames, birch bark for the way it catches fire easily and burns with a clean white light. Fire maintenance is both art and science in your world, requiring not just technical knowledge about which materials burn best under different conditions, but an understanding of the social and spiritual functions that fire serves in your community. The fire is where food is cooked and stories are told, where tools are made and decisions are reached, where the individual members of your band come together to create something larger than the sum of their separate lives. As the celebration continues into the night, the conversation turns to the recent discoveries that have begun to change your people's understanding of the plant world and its potential effects on human consciousness. The stories of Grok's encounter with the glowing mushrooms and Zara's experience with the talking leaves have become part of your community's growing collection of tales about the mysterious relationships between certain plants and human awareness. Someone suggests that this might be a good time to experiment with some of the strange dried grass that was found near the talking leaves. The material that was gathered almost as an afterthought, but has been hanging from the cave ceiling for weeks, drying slowly in the smoke from the cooking fires and developing characteristics that make it seem somehow different from ordinary grass. The grass looks innocent enough as Jorik examines it by firelight, long, slender blades that have turned a golden brown during their time in the cave, taking on a color and texture that reminds you of autumn wheat ready for harvest. When he handles it, it crumbles slightly at his touch, releasing a sweet, earthy scent that's not unpleasant, carrying notes that remind you of flowering meadows and fresh rain. In the spirit of celebration and experimentation that has marked recent weeks, and encouraged by the positive outcomes of previous encounters with unusual plants, Jorik decides to add a handful of the dried grass to the fire. The decision is made casually, without the kind of deliberation that might accompany more obviously significant choices, but sometimes the most momentous changes begin with actions that seem completely ordinary at the time. The grass catches fire, immediately burning, with a clean, bright flame that creates more smoke than you'd expect from such a small addition to the well-established fire. The smoke is thick and white, rising straight up for a few feet before spreading out along the cave ceiling in lazy rolling clouds that move with their own mysterious currents and eddies. At first, no one pays much attention to this development because smoke is a constant presence in your cave-dwelling life, as familiar and unremarkable as breath itself. Your lungs have adapted to life in enclosed spaces heated by wood fires, and your people have become skilled at managing smoke through strategic placement of openings and careful selection of burning materials. But this smoke is different in ways that become apparent gradually, almost sneakily, as if it's conducting some kind of experiment on your consciousness without asking permission or announcing its intentions. It has a sweetness to it that makes you want to breathe deeper, to pull more of it into your lungs, not because you need more air, but because there's something appealing about the way it tastes and feels as it moves through your respiratory system. The scent is complex in a way that ordinary smoke never is, earthy and green, carrying the fundamental notes of growing things, but with undertones that remind you of flowers blooming in hidden meadows, and the way the air smells just before dawn when the world is fresh and full of possibilities that the coming day might reveal. You notice the change in yourself first as a subtle shift in the quality of your attention, a gradual enhancement of perceptual acuity that makes everything around you seem more vivid and interesting than it was just moments before. The flames in the fire appear more clearly defined, their orange and yellow tongues standing out against the darkness with a precision and beauty that you've never noticed before, as if you've been looking at fire through clouded glass for your entire life and have suddenly gained access to perfect vision. The shadows on the cave walls, usually just the absence of light, begin to appear as if they're moving in patterns that follow some kind of logic that exists beyond random chance. They create shapes that are almost recognizable animals, and faces and geometric forms that shift and flow, like water, like living things engaged in some kind of dance that tells stories you almost but don't quite understand. Around the circle, similar changes are becoming apparent in others, though each person seems to be experiencing the effects in their own unique way. Old Tam, usually reserved and serious, has begun to chuckle at something only he can see, his weathered face creased with delight that transforms his normally stoic expression into something boyish and joyful. His eyes have taken on a sparkle that speaks of private amusement, and when he looks at the fire, his gaze holds the kind of wonder that you usually see only in children experiencing something for the first time. The lines around his eyes, carved by years of squinting into sun and wind, seem to have become pathways for joy rather than simply marks of age and experience. The flames are telling jokes. He announces to the circle, his voice filled with wonder and amusement, as if he's discovered something delightful that he wants to share with others. Old jokes, the kind the fire spirits have been saving up for just such a night as this. Listen, can you hear the punchlines in the way the wood pops and crackles? This statement would normally be met with polite skepticism or gentle teasing, the kind of response your people typically give to claims that venture too far into the realm of imagination. But tonight, surrounded by smoke that seems to be altering everyone's perception in subtle but unmistakable ways, Tam's observation seems to make perfect sense to everyone within range of the mysterious vapors. You find yourself leaning forward to watch the fire more carefully, and sure enough, there do seem to be patterns in the flames that suggest narrative comedy, perhaps even wisdom being communicated through the ancient language of combustion and light. The way the flames dance and merge and separate appears to follow rules that go beyond simple physics, creating a kind of visual storytelling that speaks directly to something in human consciousness that recognizes meaning in movement and pattern. Mina, sitting directly across the fire from you, has become fascinated by the smoke itself, tracking its movement with her eyes as it rises and swirls and creates temporary sculptures in the air above the flames. Her expression shows the kind of deep concentration usually reserved for the most important tasks, as if the smoke patterns contain information crucial to survival or spiritual understanding. It's like watching thoughts become visible, she murmurs, her voice soft with amazement, like seeing the actual process by which ideas form and change and connect to other ideas. Look how it moves, not random at all, but following currents we can't see, mapping the invisible architecture of the air itself. Her observation strikes you as profoundly true, revealing something about the nature of consciousness and perception that you've never had reason to consider before. The smoke does seem to be making visible something that's always been present, but never perceived, showing how breath moves through space and how the invisible medium that sustains life has its own currents and patterns and territories. Young Kyle, who has been sitting quietly near the cave entrance, suddenly starts laughing with the kind of helpless mirth that comes from recognizing something so funny that it overwhelms all other responses. Not the normal laughter of amusement or social pleasure, but something deeper and more involuntary, as if he's been overcome by the sheer absurdity and beauty of existence itself. His laughter is infectious in a way that bypasses rational thought and speaks directly to whatever part of human consciousness recognizes authentic joy when it encounters it. Soon others around the fire are chuckling, then giggling, then roaring with mirth at jokes that exist only in the smoke-altered atmosphere of the cave humor that arises from sources beyond the normal range of what your people consider funny.
Everything is so much. Kyle manages between laughs, his voice carrying the amazement of someone who has just discovered that reality contains dimensions of experience that ordinary consciousness can't access. How is everything so funny and beautiful and perfect all at the same time? How have we been living in such a magnificent world without noticing how magnificent it actually is?
His question seems to unlock something in the group consciousness, suddenly making everyone aware of the humor inherent in daily life, the comedy that's been hiding in plain sight throughout their entire existence. The way Jorik's hair sticks up at odd angles becomes hilarious rather than merely disheveled. The serious expression Brom wears while contemplating a perfectly ordinary stone transforms from practical assessment into material for cosmic comedy. The dignified manner in which the dogs position themselves around the fire, as if they're participating in a formal ceremony rather than simply seeking warmth, strikes everyone as simultaneously touching and absurd evidence of the intelligence and social awareness that exists throughout the animal kingdom, but also of the gap between human and canine understanding of what constitutes proper behavior. But it's not just laughter that fills the cave as the evening progresses and more of the mysterious grass is added to the fire. There's also a profound sense of connection developing among the people breathing the sweet smoke, as if the vapors have dissolved some of the barriers that normally exist between individual minds and separate identities. When Zara speaks, describing her enhanced perception of the patterns made by smoke against the cave ceiling, you feel as if you understand not just her words, but the emotions and images that inspire them, the complex web of associations and memories that give her observations their particular flavor and significance. When Tom nods in response to something someone has said, the gesture seems to carry layers of meaning that would normally be invisible, communicating understanding and agreement that goes far beyond simple acknowledgement. "We're all connected," Grok says quietly, his voice filled with the same wonder he showed after eating the glowing mushroom, but now expanded and deepened by shared experience. Not just us, but everything. The fire, the smoke, the cave, the forest outside. It's all one thing, all part of the same. He struggles to find words for a concept that's larger than language, but everyone in the smoke-filled circle seems to understand exactly what he means. The boundaries between self and other, between inside and outside, between human and nature, have become permeable in a way that allows for kinds of awareness that transcend ordinary perception. The revelation doesn't come as a shock, but as a gradual recognition of something that has always been true, but rarely perceived, like finally seeing the underlying structure that connects all the separate elements of existence into a single, coherent whole. The experience is both profound and utterly natural, as if consciousness has simply remembered something it knew, but had temporarily forgotten. As the evening progresses, the conversations around the fire take on qualities that none of you have experienced before, even during the most meaningful gatherings of your community. Ideas flow freely between minds, building on each other in ways that create insights no individual could have reached alone, collaborative thinking that produces understanding greater than the sum of its parts. Simple observations about the natural world expand into elaborate theories about the connections between all living things, speculation that feels both wildly imaginative and deeply grounded in direct observation. Stories become collaborative creations, with each person adding details that somehow fit perfectly with what others have contributed, as if the narrative is emerging from some collective source of creativity that transcends individual imagination. Tor, normally the most practical and down-to-earth member of your band, becomes entranced by the geometric patterns he sees in the cave ceiling. Regular shapes that emerge from the random arrangement of stone and shadow, but somehow suggest underlying mathematical principles that govern all formation and growth. "Look at how the shadows make triangles," he says, pointing upward, with the concentrated attention of someone who has made an important discovery and see how those triangles fit together to make larger shapes. It's like there's a mathematics built into everything, a sacred geometry that holds the world together and determines how everything from crystals to trees to human communities organize themselves. His observation leads to a group exploration of patterns that reveals their presence everywhere, once you know how to look for them in the arrangement of flames in the fire, in the swirling of smoke through the air, in the way people naturally position themselves around the circle, in the flow and development of conversations themselves. Everything seems to reveal hidden order secret symmetries that speak of some underlying intelligence that permeates existence at every level. The smoke continues to rise from the fire, now fed with regular additions of the mysterious grass, as people discover that maintaining the altered state requires constant attention to the burning materials. The cave has filled with a gentle haze that softens the edges of everything, making the familiar space feel dreamlike and infinite, as if the physical boundaries of your shelter have expanded to encompass much larger territories of experience. Time seems to have become elastic, with moments stretching and compressing in ways that feel perfectly natural, as if the normal flow of duration has been replaced by something more responsive to the quality of experience than to the mechanical passage of minutes and hours. The concept of time as a river flowing in one direction is replaced by something more like a vast ocean in which past and future exist simultaneously with the eternal present moment. Some people have gravitated toward quiet contemplation, sitting still and watching the smoke patterns with the absorption of scholars studying sacred texts, finding in the movement of vapor through air the kind of meaning that philosophers and shamans seek in years of meditation and ritual practice. Others have become more physically expressive, moving their hands through the smoke to create temporary sculptures of vapor, laughing at the way their gestures change the air itself and reveal the responsiveness of the invisible medium that surrounds all life. The children who fell asleep hours ago in their furs near the back of the cave rest peacefully while the adults explore these new territories of consciousness. Their breathing is deep and regular, and their faces wear expressions of such contentment that they seem to be participating in the evening's magic, even in sleep, as if the atmosphere of wonder and connection extends beyond the boundaries of waking consciousness. As the night deepens and the fire burns lower, requiring more frequent attention to maintain the production of consciousness, altering smoke, the conversations become more philosophical, more concerned with questions that your people have never thought to ask. What is the nature of consciousness itself? How does individual awareness relate to the larger patterns of existence that seem to connect all things? What is the relationship between thought and reality, between perception and truth? These are not the kind of questions that usually concern hunter-gatherers focused on the practical demands of survival. But tonight they seem as important as knowing where to find fresh water or how to track deer through dense forest. The smoke has opened doorways in the mind that lead to territories usually explored only by shamans and visionaries, realms of understanding that exist beyond the reach of ordinary consciousness. I think, says Mina, slowly her voice thick with smoke and wonder, that we've discovered something important tonight. Not just about this grass, but about the possibilities that exist in ordinary moments, about what we're capable of experiencing when we let ourselves open to influences that we usually don't even notice. Her words hang in the smoke-filled air, like a benediction acknowledging that this night has been a kind of initiation, a crossing of a threshold that will change how your people understand the relationship between consciousness and the natural world. The experience has revealed capacities for awareness and connection that exist within human consciousness, but remain dormant unless activated by specific conditions. The fire burns lower now, its flames settling into the steady glow that will sustain your community through the night. But the sense of connection and wonder remains strong among those who have shared this evening's exploration of altered consciousness. As you breathe the sweet smoke and watch the flames dance their ancient patterns, you realize that your tribe has stumbled upon something that will echo through generations. Not just the discovery of a plant that alters consciousness, But the recognition that such alterations might have value, might teach lessons that ordinary awareness cannot access, might reveal aspects of reality that remain hidden to minds operating within the normal boundaries of survival-focused attention. The cave feels larger than usual tonight, as if the smoke has expanded its boundaries to encompass the entire valley, the whole world, the vast cosmos of which your small band is such a tiny but significant part. The sensation is not one of losing yourself in something larger, but of discovering that what you thought was your individual self is actually part of something much more magnificent and interconnected than you ever imagined. 3 moons have waned and waxed since that first night of smoke and revelation, and the long winter has settled over your land like a heavy fur blanket that seems determined to test every survival skill your people have accumulated over countless generations. Snow covers the valley floor in drifts that reach halfway up the cave entrance, creating a white landscape so uniform and featureless that navigation beyond familiar landmarks becomes dangerous for anyone not intimately familiar with the terrain. The wind carries the sharp bite of ice that can freeze exposed skin in moments, and the temperature drops so low that even the stream where your people have always drawn water develops a thick coating of ice that must be broken daily to access the life-sustaining liquid beneath. These are the months when survival depends on careful resource management, when every piece of dried meat and every gathered root becomes precious beyond measure, when the difference between life and death can be determined by something as simple as maintaining adequate body temperature. But something has changed in the rhythm of your tribe's winter routine, something that fills the elders with growing unease and threatens to disrupt the careful balance of labor and resource conservation that has kept your people alive through countless harsh seasons. The discovery of consciousness-altering plants has created new priorities and new problems that your ancestors never faced, challenges that go beyond simple resource management to questions about the nature of human nature itself. You wake this morning to find the central fire burning lower than it should, its flames reduced to sullen red coals that provide little warmth against the bitter cold seeping through the cave entrance like an invading army of ice and wind. Normally someone would have been awake through the night to tend the fire, feeding it with carefully selected fuel to maintain the steady heat that keeps your community alive during the darkest months of the year. But lately such responsibilities have been overlooked. Not intentionally abandoned, but pushed aside by other priorities that seem more immediately compelling to those who have discovered the consciousness-expanding properties of certain plants. The careful rotation of fire-tending duties that has kept your people warm for generations has broken down as more and more community members become absorbed in pursuing experiences that exist beyond the boundaries of ordinary awareness. Near the dying fire, you can see 3 figures from your band huddled together in a tight circle, their eyes red-rimmed from smoke and lack of sleep, their attention focused entirely on a small pile of the dried grass that has become increasingly popular since the night of revelation. They're burning tiny portions of it in a shallow stone bowl, breathing the sweet smoke with the desperate intensity of people dying of thirst who have found water, but know the source is limited. Their dedication to this activity is complete and exclusionary, shutting out awareness of everything else that might require attention or concern. The cold that seeps through the cave entrance doesn't register in their consciousness. The dimming fire that should be their primary concern receives no attention. Even basic needs like hunger and thirst seem to have become secondary to the pursuit of the altered states that the smoke provides. Kale is among them, but this is not the eager young hunter you remember from autumn. The boy whose enthusiasm for learning and contributing to the community made him a favorite among the adults who saw in him the future of your people. His face has become gaunt, his cheeks hollow with the weight loss that comes from forgetting to eat regularly, from becoming so absorbed in altered consciousness that basic physical needs fade into irrelevance. His hands shake slightly as he adds another pinch of grass to the smouldering bowl, the tremor of someone whose body is protesting the neglect it has received, while his mind pursued experiences that seem more real and important than mere physical existence. When he looks up at you, his eyes hold a distant, hungry quality that sends a chill through your chest, a look that speaks of needs that have nothing to do with food or warmth or any of the things that normally occupy human attention. "Join us," he says, his voice hoarse from smoke, and neglect the words emerging slowly, as if he's translating from a language that doesn't quite fit the familiar patterns of ordinary speech. The spirits are speaking this morning. They have so much to tell us about the true nature of reality, about the connections that exist beneath the surface of ordinary experience. But the spirits, if they are indeed speaking, seem to have little practical wisdom to offer about the immediate challenges facing your community. While Kale and his companions chase visions in the smoke, immersing themselves in experiences that feel profound and meaningful, but offer no guidance for dealing with the material world, the work of winter survival goes undone with consequences that accumulate daily. The water containers are empty because no one has made the difficult and dangerous journey to the stream through snow that reaches waist-deep in places and wind that can disorient even experienced travelers within minutes of leaving the shelter of the cave. The meat stores are running dangerously low because the hunters have been more interested in exploring consciousness than tracking the game that becomes increasingly scarce as winter progresses and animals retreat to their own survival strategies. Even the simple maintenance tasks that keep your community functioning have been neglected as more people become absorbed in the pursuit of plant-induced transcendence. Tools that need sharpening remain dull, clothing that needs repair develops holes that let in deadly cold, and the social bonds that hold your small band together begin to fray as responsibilities shift onto fewer and fewer shoulders. Brom emerges from the deeper recesses of the cave, where he's been taking inventory of your dwindling supplies, his face dark with worry and frustration that has been building for weeks as he watches the practical foundation of your community's survival being undermined by what he sees as dangerous self-indulgence. As the practical leader of your band, he's watched the dissolution of discipline with growing alarm, understanding better than anyone else how close your people are coming to the kind of disaster that wipes out entire communities during harsh winters. His weathered hands are clenched into fists, and his voice carries the weight of authority earned through decades of making life and death decisions when he speaks to the assembled community. "This has to stop," he announces, his words cutting through the smoke-hazed atmosphere of the cave like a blade cutting through soft wood. "We have maybe 20 days of food left if we're careful. The hardest part of winter still lies ahead of us. If we don't change course now, we won't see spring." His words should carry the power of life and death truth, because they are literally life and death truth, backed by years of experience in managing winter survival. But the smoke dreamers seem incapable of processing information that exists outside their immediate experience of altered consciousness, their attention so completely absorbed by internal visions that external reality has become a distant and irrelevant concern. They nod vaguely at Brom's concerns, their expressions showing the kind of polite acknowledgement that people give to information they consider unimportant, but their attention immediately returns to the patterns of vapor rising from their bowl, as if the smoke contains wisdom more crucial than mere survival. The disconnect between the urgency of Brom's warning and their casual dismissal of it reveals how fundamentally the consciousness-altering plants have changed their priorities and values. Zara, who discovered the talking leaves and has become one of the most articulate advocates for what she calls the new way of seeing, has developed an elaborate philosophical framework that justifies the community's increasing focus on consciousness exploration at the expense of practical concerns. Her quick intelligence, which once served the tribe in matters of plant identification and resource management, has become entirely focused on elaborating theories about reality and awareness that grow more complex and less useful with each passing day. "You don't understand," she tells Brom, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to a child who lacks the capacity for sophisticated thought, her voice carrying the gentle condescension of someone who believes she has access to truths that others are too limited to grasp. Food is it's just matter, temporary stuff that feeds the body but doesn't nourish the spirit. But consciousness is eternal, the real substance of existence. We're learning to live on the real sustenance, the food that never runs out because it comes from the source of all nourishment. The irony of this statement is apparent to everyone except those most deeply committed to the consciousness-expanding plants. Zara herself has lost so much weight that her clothes hang loose on her frame, and her skin has taken on the waxy pallor of someone whose body is consuming itself for fuel, while her mind pursues experiences that provide no calories or nutrients. Her philosophy sounds profound when expressed in the abstract terms she favors, but the practical reality is that she's slowly starving while convincing herself that she's accessing higher forms of nourishment. The gap between theory and reality has become so wide that she seems genuinely unaware of the contradiction between her claims about spiritual sustenance and her obvious physical deterioration. Mina, whose plant knowledge has kept the tribe healthy for decades, and who understands better than anyone the relationship between consciousness and physical well-being, watches these developments with the particular pain of someone who can see exactly what's happening but feels powerless to prevent it. She's seen this pattern before in individual tribe members who became obsessed with particular plants or practices that promised transcendence but delivered dependence. But she's never seen it spread through so much of the community at once, never witnessed the kind of collective abandonment of practical wisdom that threatens not just individual well-being, but the survival of the entire group. Her experience tells her that recovery is possible, but only if the affected individuals can be helped to recognize the difference between genuine spiritual insight and chemical dependency disguised as enlightenment. The grass is teaching them to forget their bodies, she explains to you quietly, her voice thick with worry and the weight of understanding what others refuse to see. They think they're learning important truths about consciousness and reality, but they're actually learning to ignore the signals that keep them alive. The plants aren't evil, but they're being used in ways that disconnect people from the very world they claim to be more deeply connected to. You can see the evidence of this everywhere in the cave as you look around with the kind of attention that the plant users seem to have lost. The normally tidy living spaces have become cluttered with abandoned projects, half-finished tools that were set aside when their makers became distracted by visions, unfinished clothing repairs that could mean the difference between warmth and deadly cold cooking implements left unwashed after meals, because cleaning them seemed less important than pursuing the next transcendent experience. The social bonds that hold your small community together have begun to fray as people divide into those who seek consciousness-altering experiences and those who maintain focus on survival requirements. Arguments break out over resource allocation, with the plant users demanding equal shares of food despite their decreasing contributions to the work that secures those resources. The non-users grow resentful of supporting people who have essentially checked out of community life, while the plant enthusiasts accuse the others of being trapped in limited thinking that prevents them from appreciating the profound insights available through expanded consciousness. Both sides feel misunderstood and unappreciated, creating tensions that threaten to tear apart the cooperation that survival requires. Even worse, the grass supply itself is running dangerously low, creating a new source of anxiety and conflict that your people have never faced before. The original bundle that was gathered in autumn has dwindled to perhaps a week's worth, if used sparingly, by the current number of regular consumers. But the smoke dreamers show no inclination toward conservation, no ability to ration a limited resource that has become central to their sense of well-being and identity. If anything, they seem to require larger amounts each time to achieve the same effects, as if their bodies are building resistance to the plant's influence and demanding increasing doses to maintain the altered states they've come to depend upon. The progression toward tolerance and dependence follows patterns that Mina recognizes from her knowledge of other powerful plants, but the users themselves seem unaware of what's happening to them. Grok, who was the first to experiment with consciousness, altering plants through his encounter with the glowing mushrooms, has become something like a spiritual teacher to the other plant users, his early experiences giving him authority among those seeking guidance in navigating altered states of consciousness. But his advice consistently leads toward greater consumption rather than moderation, deeper immersion in chemically induced visions, rather than integration of insights with practical life. The plants are calling us home. He tells anyone who will listen his voice, carrying the conviction of someone who has found ultimate truth and wants to share it with others. This world of hunting and gathering and worrying about winter, that's not real life. Real life is what we find in the smoke, in the visions, in the connections that normal consciousness can't access. We're being invited to evolve beyond the limitations that have trapped humanity for thousands of years. His words carry conviction and appeal to the human longing for transcendence, for experiences that go beyond the ordinary challenges of daily existence. But they also carry the seeds of disaster, because if real life exists only in altered states of consciousness, then the practical demands of survival become obstacles to be overcome rather than essential requirements to be met. The division in your tribe has created social tensions that threaten to tear apart the fabric of cooperation that has kept your people alive for generations. Young families with children are particularly stressed by these developments, watching their food supplies dwindle, while some community members pursue what looks increasingly like collective madness disguised as spiritual advancement. The children themselves seem confused by the changing dynamics, unsure why some adults have become so different, so distant, so unreliable in their attention to the basic needs that children depend on adults to meet. They ask questions that the adults struggle to answer. Why doesn't Uncle Kale help with the hunting anymore? Why does Aunt Zara talk to plants but not listen when children need help? Why do some grown-ups act like they're not really here anymore? Tom, whose steady presence has always been a stabilizing force in the tribe, attempts to mediate between the factions with the kind of diplomatic skill that has helped resolve conflicts throughout his adult life. But his efforts at compromise satisfy no one, because the fundamental disagreement goes beyond simple differences of opinion to conflicting views about what human life should be for. The plant users accuse him of being trapped in old ways of thinking that prevent appreciation of the expanded possibilities that consciousness-altering substances offer. The practical members of the tribe see his tolerance as enabling dangerous behavior that threatens everyone's survival. Both sides interpret his moderation as evidence that he doesn't understand the significance of what's at stake. Maybe we need to establish boundaries, he suggests during a tense evening discussion that brings together representatives from both factions. Specific times for exploration and other times dedicated to the work we need to survive. Ways to honor both the insights these plants provide and the requirements of staying alive in the physical world. But boundaries require agreement about basic values, and agreement requires a shared understanding of what's important and why. The plant users have developed a fundamentally different value system, one that prioritizes immediate experience over long-term consequences, individual revelation over community responsibility, transcendent insight over practical wisdom. They speak of enlightenment and expanded consciousness as if these experiences justify any cost, including the cost of community survival. The non-users speak of responsibility and practical wisdom as if these values are self-evidently more important than any individual experience, no matter how profound or meaningful it might seem to the person having it. The situation comes to a crisis point on a particularly bitter morning, when the hunting party returns empty-handed after 3 days in the frozen wilderness, their faces drawn with exhaustion and their spirits crushed by failure. They've tracked promising signs for miles through snow and wind, only to lose the trail when weather conditions made further pursuit impossible. They're desperately in need of warm food and rest, physical comfort that will restore their strength for another attempt at securing the meat that keeps your community alive. But they find the central fire reduced to ashes because no one remembered to maintain it through the night, and the remaining food stores depleted by people too consumed with their visions to remember that eating requires planning and conservation. Brom's anger finally boils over his frustration with the situation, reaching a breaking point that demands decisive action. This ends today, he declares, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has led successful hunts through the darkest times and earned the right to make difficult decisions. We divide the remaining grass into equal portions. Each person gets their share, and when it's gone, it's gone. No sharing, no trading, no exceptions. The plant users react to this pronouncement with something approaching panic, their calm acceptance of spiritual wisdom replaced by desperate concern about being cut off from their source of transcendence. The idea of forced rationing, of being limited in their access to the experiences that have become central to their identity and well-being, creates a level of anxiety that reveals how dependent they've become on the consciousness-altering substances. Some plead for larger portions, others propose elaborate justifications for why they should be exempt from the restrictions. A few suggest that the entire policy is misguided, that the tribe should commit more fully to the consciousness-expanding path, rather than retreating into what they characterize as limited thinking about survival and resource management. But Brom's decision reflects the wishes of the majority, including many who have experimented with the plants, but recognize the need for limits that balance exploration with responsibility. The division is carried out with mathematical precision, leaving each person with enough dried grass for perhaps 5 more sessions if used carefully and sparingly. As you hold your own small portion of the precious plant material, you're struck by how something so innocent-looking has created such profound disruption in your community. The grass appears completely ordinary dry brown blades that could be mistaken for any of dozens of similar plants that grow in the meadows around your territory. But its power to alter consciousness has proven to be both gift and curse, opening doors to experiences that expand understanding while threatening to close the door on survival itself. The winter nights stretch ahead, filled with uncertainty about whether your tribe will find a way to balance the allure of transcendence with the demands of staying alive in a world that offers no forgiveness for communities that lose their connection to practical reality. The shaman Uruk has always been different from the rest of your tribe, set apart not just by his ritual scars and bone ornaments, but by a fundamental orientation toward existence that sees spiritual significance in everything, from the pattern of bird flights to the way frost forms on cave walls. Where others see practical problems requiring practical solutions, he perceives signs and portents, messages from spirits that dwell in the spaces between earth and sky, communications, from forces that guide the hidden workings of the world. For 3 decades, Uruk has served your people as healer, counselor, and interpreter of dreams, his knowledge spanning not just the medicinal properties of plants, but their spiritual significance, their relationships with the invisible forces that influence human destiny. His weathered face bears the ritual scarification that marks him as a bridge between the world of flesh and the realm of visions, each scar carrying meaning that connects him to the lineage of shamans who have served your people since time immemorial. His dark eyes have always held depths that seem to reflect experiences beyond ordinary human understanding, but since the discovery of the consciousness-altering plants, something fundamental has shifted in your shaman's relationship with reality. The careful balance he once maintained between visionary experience and practical wisdom has tilted decisively toward the mystical, leaving behind the steady guidance your people have always depended upon. You wake this morning to find Uruk sitting alone near the cave entrance, his body motionless as carved stone, but his eyes wide and staring, fixed on something that exists beyond the physical landscape of snow and ice that stretches across the winter valley. The cold doesn't seem to affect him, though his breath creates clouds of vapor that dissipate quickly in the frigid air, as if his attention is so completely absorbed by internal visions that external discomfort has ceased to register in his consciousness. In his lap rests a wooden bowl that once held water for the ritual cleansing that precedes important ceremonies, but now contains only the crumbled remains of several of the luminescent mushrooms. The bowl is empty now, but the sweet, earthy residue that clings to its sides suggests that he consumed them all during the night, spending the dark hours in communion with whatever forces speak through the consciousness-altering fungi. His appearance is startling, even alarming, representing a dramatic departure from the careful grooming and ritual presentation that has always marked his role as spiritual leader. His normally neat hair hangs in tangles around his face, and his ritual scarification seems more pronounced, as if the marks have deepened overnight or become more visible as his flesh has grown gaunt from neglecting to eat. But most disturbing are his eyes' pupils, so dilated that they appear completely black, reflecting an inner landscape that bears no resemblance to the winter morning surrounding him. When he looks at you, it's as if he's seeing through you to something else entirely, some reality that exists in the same space, but operates according to completely different laws. The moon god speaks. He announces to no one in particular, his voice carrying the formal cadence he reserves for the most important prophecies, the tone that signals communication from realms beyond ordinary human experience. She tells me of the great hunger that is coming, the hunger that will devour not flesh, but spirit that will consume the very essence of what makes us human. Several members of your tribe have gathered to listen, drawn by the authority in Uruk's voice and their deep respect for his traditional role as spiritual guide and interpreter of divine will. But his words this morning carry a strangeness that makes everyone uneasy, a quality that suggests he's accessing information from sources that may not have your people's best interests at heart. She says. Uruk pauses, tilting his head, as if straining to hear a faint voice that speaks in frequencies beyond normal perception, his entire body oriented toward receiving communications that exist beyond the reach of ordinary consciousness. She says that the old ways are ending, that the time of hunting and gathering and worrying about winter survival is passing into history. The plants have come to teach us new ways of being, human ways that transcend the limitations that have trapped our ancestors for countless generations. Mina, who has known Uruk longer than anyone, and who has watched him grow from an eager young apprentice into a wise spiritual leader, approaches cautiously. Her expression shows concern mixed with skepticism. She's seen people under the influence of various consciousness-altering substances before, and she knows the difference between genuine spiritual insight and chemically induced delusion. Uruk, she says gently, her voice carrying the warmth of long friendship and the authority of someone whose wisdom has been proven through decades of successful healing. When did you last eat? When did you last sleep? Your body needs care if your spirit is to remain strong enough to receive true visions. But the shaman seems incapable of processing such mundane questions, his attention remaining fixed on realities that exist only in his altered consciousness. His responses come from that invisible realm rather than from the snow-covered world where his physical body sits, growing cold and frail. The moon god laughs at such concerns. He says with a dismissive wave of his hand, the gesture lacking his usual precision and control. Food is for those who haven't learned to eat light, to nourish themselves on the pure energy that flows through all things. Sleep is for those who fear to remain awake in the true world, the world that exists beneath the illusion of physical reality. As the morning progresses, Uruk's pronouncements become increasingly grandiose and disconnected from the practical realities facing your tribe. He speaks of conversations with star spirits who reveal the hidden structure of the cosmos, of messages encoded in the patterns of frost on cave walls that contain blueprints for human transformation of a great change that will elevate your people beyond the need for mundane survival. The mushrooms are messengers, he declares, his voice rising with evangelical fervor that transforms his usual quiet authority into something more dramatic and unsettling. They carry teachings from the realm of pure consciousness, instructions for evolving beyond the limitations of physical existence. Those who consume them regularly will transcend the boundaries that separate human from divine. We will become like the spirits themselves, beings of pure awareness, free from hunger and cold and death. Young Kira, who has experimented with both the talking leaves and the mysterious grass, and whose experiences have prepared her to accept ideas that would have seemed absurd just a few months ago, listens to Uruk's words with growing excitement. Her own encounters with consciousness-altering plants have opened her mind to possibilities that her elders still struggle to understand. "Is it true?" she asks breathlessly, her voice carrying the hope of someone who desperately wants to believe that transcendence is possible, that the hardships of ordinary life might be left behind in favor of something more beautiful and meaningful. Can we really become like spirits? Can we escape from all the suffering and struggle that seems to define human existence? Uruk's attention focuses on her with laser intensity, as if she's the first person to truly understand what he's been trying to communicate. His eyes, black with dilated pupils, seem to reflect depths of knowledge that extend far beyond anything normally accessible to human consciousness. "You have tasted the truth," he tells her, his voice warm with approval and recognition, as if he's found a kindred spirit in a world full of people too limited to appreciate the magnitude of what's being offered. "You know that ordinary consciousness is just a prison, a limitation imposed by those who fear real knowledge, who prefer the safety of ignorance to the dangerous beauty of enlightenment." His words have a seductive power that's difficult to resist, especially for someone who has already experienced the consciousness-expanding effects of the mysterious plants. The promise of transcendence, of escape from the harsh realities of winter survival, and the constant struggle against hunger and cold appeals to something deep in the human spirit that yearns for experiences beyond the ordinary challenges of daily existence. Even those who have been most critical of the plant users find themselves wondering if Uruk might possess insights that their practical minds are too limited to grasp. His authority as shaman carries weight accumulated over decades of successful spiritual guidance, and his obvious conviction makes it difficult to dismiss his visions as simple delusion. But Brahm, whose responsibility for the tribe's survival has made him acutely aware of the dangers posed by escapist thinking, challenges the shaman directly with the kind of practical wisdom that has kept your people alive through countless harsh seasons. If the mushrooms grant such wisdom, he asks, his voice carrying both respect for Uruk's traditional authority and determination to protect the community from dangerous influences, why do those who eat them seem less capable of taking care of themselves? Why do they forget to eat, forget to maintain the fires, forget their responsibilities to the people who depend on them? Uruk's response reveals the extent to which his thinking has become detached from cause and effect, from the logical connections that govern practical life and successful community functioning. His philosophy has evolved to a point where it can accommodate any contradiction by redefining the terms of the discussion. Responsibilities. He repeats the word as if it's foreign, as if the concept of obligation to others belongs to a language he no longer speaks. The only responsibility is to consciousness itself, to the expansion of awareness that the plant teachers offer. Everything else is distraction illusion, the meaningless, busy work of people who haven't awakened to their true nature as spiritual beings temporarily trapped in physical form. This philosophy, however appealing it might sound in abstract terms, has concrete and dangerous implications for a small band of hunter-gatherers struggling to survive the harshest season of the year. But Uruk seems incapable of making these connections, or perhaps unwilling to acknowledge them, because doing so would require admitting that his visions might be leading him away from, rather than toward, truth. As the day continues, his behavior becomes increasingly erratic, his responses less and less connected to the questions people ask or the concerns they express. He speaks to people who aren't there, responds to conversations that exist only in his altered consciousness, and delivers lengthy monologues about cosmic truths that sound profound, but offer no practical guidance for the challenges facing your community. The moon god tells me that food is an illusion. He announces during the midday meal, refusing the bowl of stew that Mina offers him with the gentle insistence of someone who understands that spiritual insight requires a healthy body to sustain it. She feeds me with starlight and dreams. I haven't been hungry in days because I've learned to nourish myself on the energy that flows through all living things. But his physical appearance tells a different story, contradicting his claims about spiritual nourishment with evidence that can't be dismissed or reinterpreted. Like others who have become obsessed with the consciousness-altering plants, Uruk has lost significant weight, his clothes hanging loose on his frame, and his skin taking on the pallor of someone whose body is consuming itself for fuel, while his mind pursues experiences that provide no calories or nutrients. The most disturbing aspect of his transformation is the way he uses his traditional authority to recruit others into his expanding delusion, leveraging the respect he's earned over decades of spiritual service to promote ideas that threaten the very survival of the people he's supposed to protect and guide. Several of the younger tribe members, already drawn to experimentation with the mysterious plants and impressed by the intensity of Uruk's visions, begin to see his extreme state as a goal to aspire to, rather than a cautionary example of what happens when spiritual practice becomes disconnected from practical wisdom. If our shaman says these are teachings from the spirits, reasons Jorik his voice, carrying the conviction of someone who wants to believe that his own plant use is justified by spiritual authority, then maybe we're the ones who don't understand. Maybe we're being too cautious, too attached to old ways of thinking that prevent us from embracing the evolution that's being offered to us. This interpretation gains support among those who have had positive experiences with consciousness-altering plants, but have been struggling with social pressure to moderate their use. Uruk's pronouncements provide spiritual justification for indulgence, a way to frame excessive consumption as religious duty rather than self-destructive behavior. The situation becomes even more complex when Uruk begins to claim direct communication with deceased members of the tribe, reporting conversations with ancestors who have passed into the spirit realm and who supposedly endorse the path of consciousness expansion that he's promoting. Your grandmother speaks to me, he tells old Tam with conviction that seems absolutely genuine, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has privileged access to information from beyond the grave. She says the mushrooms are the food of the spirit world, that eating them regularly will prepare you for the journey to the land of the dead. She's waiting for you there, but only those who have learned to see beyond the illusion of physical reality will be able to find her. These claims create powerful emotional responses in people who are grieving losses and seeking comfort, especially during the isolation and hardship of winter, when thoughts naturally turn to those who are no longer present. The possibility of communication with loved ones who have passed into the spirit realm is almost irresistible, even for those who maintain skepticism about Uruk's current mental state. But Mena, whose knowledge of plants includes understanding of their psychological effects, and who has seen similar patterns in individuals who consume powerful consciousness-altering substances without proper preparation or guidance, recognizes what's happening to your shaman. She's witnessed the gradual dissolution of the boundary between inner experience and external reality, the increasing dominance of chemical-induced perceptions over sensory input from the actual world. She knows that what Uruk interprets as communication with spirits is actually the product of neurochemical changes that create the illusion of contact with external entities. He's lost, she confides to you quietly, her voice thick with sorrow for someone she's known and respected for most of her adult life. The mushrooms have taken him so far into the spirit realm that he can't find his way back to his body, to this world, to us. He's become a ghost among the living, present in form, but absent in everything that makes presence meaningful. As evening approaches, Uruk's condition becomes even more apparent to everyone who observes him. He sits by the fire but doesn't seem to see the flames, his eyes focused on visions that have become more real to him than the physical world that surrounds his deteriorating body. He speaks constantly but rarely in response to anything others say, his monologue emerging from internal experiences that have no connection to the concerns and conversations of his community. His attention is completely absorbed by the elaborate reality he's constructed from mushroom-induced visions, a world where he serves as prophet and interpreter for cosmic forces that reveal ultimate truths about existence and consciousness. In this internal reality, his insights are profound and his authority absolute, but the cost of maintaining this fantasy is complete disconnection from the people and responsibilities that once gave his life meaning and purpose. The tragedy of his situation is that his visions may indeed contain elements of genuine spiritual insight, authentic encounters with aspects of reality that remain hidden to ordinary awareness. The consciousness-altering plants are certainly powerful teachers, capable of revealing connections and patterns that exist beyond the reach of normal perception. But without the grounding influence of practical wisdom, without the balance provided by attention to physical needs and social responsibilities, even authentic spiritual experiences can become destructive. The insights that might have enriched his understanding of existence have instead isolated him from the very existence he claims to understand more deeply. As you watch your shaman disappear into the labyrinth of his own transformed consciousness, you're struck by the double-edged nature of the gifts your tribe has discovered. The same plants that can provide profound insights into the nature of existence can also lead to complete disconnection from the world in which existence actually unfolds. The fire burns lower as the night deepens, but Uruk continues his monologue, speaking to spirits that may or may not exist, delivering teachings that may or may not contain wisdom, serving as both inspiration and warning for a tribe learning to navigate the dangerous waters between transcendence and survival. His example raises questions that your people have never had to consider before. How do you distinguish between authentic spiritual insight and chemically induced delusion? How do you honor the genuine wisdom that consciousness-altering plants can provide while protecting individuals and communities from the dangers they also pose? These are questions that will haunt your people long after the winter ends, long after the immediate crisis of survival has passed. The discovery of consciousness-altering plants has opened doors that can never be fully closed, revealing possibilities for human experience that are both wonderful and terrible, both enlightening and potentially destructive. One day, as the winter reaches its deepest and darkest point, and the isolation of cave life begins to wear on everyone's spirits, someone suggests that perhaps the entire tribe should try the consciousness-altering leaves together as a way of bringing the community back together and healing the divisions that have developed between those who seek transcendent experiences and those who focus on practical survival. The idea emerges during a particularly tense evening, when arguments about resource allocation have created an atmosphere of suspicion and resentment that threatens to tear apart the social bonds that hold your small band together. The plant users feel misunderstood and judged by those who question their priorities, while the practical members of the community feel burdened by the need to support people who seem to have abandoned their responsibilities. Zara, whose articulate advocacy for consciousness expansion has made her a spokesperson for the plant enthusiasts, proposes the collective experiment as a way of demonstrating to the skeptics what they've been missing and perhaps finding common ground through shared experience. If we all tried the leaves together, she suggests, her voice carrying the earnest conviction of someone who believes she's found a solution to the community's problem. Maybe those who haven't experienced expanded consciousness would understand what we've discovered. Maybe we could bridge the gap between different ways of seeing reality and find a path that honors both practical wisdom and spiritual insight. The proposal generates intense discussion with arguments on both sides that reveal the depth of the philosophical divide that has developed within your tribe. Those who have already experimented with the consciousness-altering plants see it as an opportunity to share the wonder and connection they've experienced, while those who have remained focused on survival requirements worry about the risks of having an entire community under the influence of unpredictable substances. But the isolation and stress of winter have created a desperation for anything that might restore harmony and cooperation to the group, and eventually even the most cautious members of the tribe agree to participate in what becomes known as the Great Experiment, a collective journey into altered consciousness that will either unite the community or destroy it entirely. The preparation takes several days as Mina and the other plant experts carefully calculate dosages and gather enough of the precious leaves to provide each member of the tribe with what they hope will be a meaningful but manageable experience. The children are excluded from the experiment, left in the care of the few adults who volunteer to remain sober and maintain basic safety, while the rest of the community explores altered states of consciousness. When the appointed evening arrives, the entire tribe gathers around the largest fire pit your people have ever constructed, its flames reaching toward the cave ceiling and its warmth extending to every corner of your living space. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation and nervousness as people prepare to embark on a journey into territories of consciousness that most of them have never explored. The leaves are distributed with ceremonial gravity, each person receiving a carefully measured portion, along with instructions about how to consume them safely and what to expect from the experience. The ritual nature of the distribution helps create a sense of shared purpose and mutual support that your tribe hopes will guide them through whatever revelations or challenges the night might bring. As people begin to chew the leaves, the familiar bitter taste followed by sweet aftertaste creates a communal experience that immediately begins to dissolve some of the tensions that have divided your people in recent weeks. There's something powerful about sharing the same substance at the same time, about embarking together on a journey into the unknown. For the first hour, nothing dramatic happens beyond the gradual onset of the heightened awareness and enhanced perception that the plant users have learned to expect. Conversations become more animated and wide-ranging observations about the natural world become more detailed and philosophical, and the boundaries between individual perspectives begin to blur in ways that create a sense of group consciousness. But as more time passes and the effects of the leaves intensify, the experiment begins to reveal both the potential benefits and the serious dangers of collective consciousness alteration. The enhanced empathy and connection that people experience creates moments of profound understanding and emotional intimacy, but it also amplifies negative emotions and unresolved conflicts in ways that threaten to tear the community apart. What begins as enhanced communication gradually becomes confusion as people lose track of which thoughts and feelings belong to them, and which arise from the group consciousness they're experiencing. The dissolution of individual boundaries, which initially feels liberating and connecting, eventually becomes disorienting and frightening as people struggle to maintain any sense of separate identity. The fire, which has been the central focus of the gathering, begins to take on properties that exist more in the collective imagination than in physical reality. People report seeing faces in the flames, hearing voices in the crackling of burning wood, receiving messages from the fire itself about the nature of existence and the future of the tribe. "The fire is laughing," announces Tam, his voice filled with delight and wonder, "but it's also crying. It's happy because we're finally listening to what it's been trying to tell us for years, but sad because it knows we won't remember these lessons when the leaves stop working." His observation triggers a cascade of similar revelations as other people begin to interpret the fire's behavior as intentional communication. Soon the entire group is engaged in an elaborate conversation with what they perceive as the fire's consciousness, asking questions and receiving answers that seem to emerge from the flames themselves. The collective focus on the fire creates a shared hallucination that becomes increasingly elaborate and disconnected from reality. People see the fire transforming into various shapes, animals, human figures, geometric patterns that reveal the hidden structure of the universe. They hear it speaking in voices that sound like deceased relatives, ancient spirits, or cosmic forces that govern the destiny of all living things. What begins as playful interpretation of natural phenomena gradually becomes something more serious and potentially dangerous as the group loses its collective ability to distinguish between perception and imagination, between symbolic meaning and literal truth. The fire becomes not just a source of heat and light, but an oracle, a divine presence that offers guidance about every aspect of life. "Look!" Zara calls out, her voice trembling with excitement and awe. "The fire is showing us the future. I can see our children and our children's children all gathered around fires like this one, all connected to the same consciousness that we're experiencing right now." Her vision triggers similar experiences in others as the collective altered state creates a feedback loop of shared imagination that becomes increasingly elaborate and convincing. People begin to see not just the future but the past, claiming to witness the lives of their ancestors and to understand the hidden connections that link all generations together. The sense of expanded awareness and cosmic connection is intoxicating, creating feelings of unity and understanding that seem to justify any sacrifice. In this state, the practical concerns that have divided the tribe seem petty and irrelevant compared to the profound insights that are apparently being revealed through collective consciousness exploration. But as the night progresses, the darker aspects of the collective experience begin to emerge. The enhanced empathy that initially created feelings of connection also amplifies negative emotions, making conflicts and resentments more intense rather than resolving them. Old grievances surface with unprecedented force, and the dissolved boundaries between individuals make it impossible to contain or manage interpersonal tensions. Arguments break out over interpretations of what the fire is supposedly communicating, with different factions claiming to understand its true message, while dismissing others as deluded or spiritually inadequate. The unity that the experiment was supposed to create fractures into competing visions of truth, each group convinced that their interpretation represents authentic insight, while others suffer from false consciousness. The situation becomes dangerous when people begin to act on the guidance they believe they're receiving from the fire and other imagined sources of wisdom. Someone decides that the cave needs to be purified by removing all tools made from animal bones, claiming that the spirits of dead animals are interfering with the flow of consciousness. Others become convinced that certain members of the tribe are secretly working against the community's spiritual evolution and need to be expelled or reformed. The collective loss of practical judgment creates chaos as people abandon basic safety protocols in favor of actions that seem profound and meaningful in their altered state, but pose serious risks to individual and community welfare. The fire that has served as the focus of their shared visions nearly spreads beyond its containment, as people become too absorbed in their internal experiences to maintain proper attention to its management. Most seriously, the group begins to forget about the children who have been sleeping in the back of the cave, while the adults explore consciousness expansion. The enhanced awareness that the plant users claim to possess doesn't extend to awareness of practical responsibilities, and it falls to the few sober adults to ensure that basic needs are met, while the majority of the community remains lost in their shared delusion. As dawn approaches and the effects of the leaves begin to fade, the magnitude of what has happened becomes apparent to everyone involved. The cave is in disarray with tools and supplies scattered by people who thought they were following spiritual guidance, but were actually responding to chemically induced impulses that had no connection to practical wisdom. More importantly, the community has learned that collective consciousness alteration, rather than solving the problems created by individual use of consciousness, altering plants amplifies those problems and creates new dangers that threaten the very survival of the group. The experiment that was supposed to bring unity has instead revealed how vulnerable human communities are to collective delusion when the normal checks and balances of individual judgment are dissolved. The morning after brings a sobering assessment of what has been gained and lost through the great experiment. While some participants report profound insights and experiences of connection that they will treasure for the rest of their lives, the overall effect has been to demonstrate the dangers of abandoning practical wisdom in favor of chemically induced visions, no matter how meaningful those visions might seem to the people experiencing them. The tribe is left to grapple with questions that have no easy answers. How do you honor the genuine insights that consciousness-altering plants can provide while protecting individuals and communities from their dangers? How do you distinguish between authentic spiritual experience and collective delusion? How do you balance the human hunger for transcendence with the practical requirements of survival in a world that offers no forgiveness for communities that lose their connection to reality? The crisis that has been building throughout the long winter reaches its climax on the darkest night of the year, when the moon hides her face behind thick clouds and the wind howls through the valley like the voices of angry ancestors warning their descendants about the consequences of abandoning ancient wisdom in favor of seductive delusions. You wake to find the central fire reduced to glowing embers and 3 members of your tribe missing from their sleeping furs, Kael'Zara and young Yorick, drawn perhaps by visions or voices that called them into the frozen wilderness with promises of transcendence that no earthly paradise could match. Brom discovers their absence just before dawn, when he rises to tend the fire and finds their sleeping places empty, their warmest furs abandoned in their desperate flight toward whatever paradise their altered consciousness had promised them in the depths of the night. The tracks leading from the cave tell a story of people who left willingly but without preparation, following impulses that seemed more important than survival itself. The search party moves quickly through the snow, following footprints that lead toward the original mushroom grove that place where everything began, where innocent curiosity first opened the door to transcendent experience and started your people down a path that has led to this moment of crisis. The trail is easy to follow at first, 3 sets of footprints pressed deep into the crystalline snow that sparkles like scattered stars in the early morning light. But as the tracks lead deeper into the forest, they begin to wander erratically, suggesting that those who made them were following guidance that had little connection to geographical reality. You find them huddled together beneath the ancient oak where Grok first encountered the glowing mushrooms, their bodies curved around each other for warmth in the age-old human response to mortal danger. But their positioning suggests that they sought the tree not for practical shelter, but because they believed it held spiritual significance, that it represented a portal to the realm of pure consciousness they were trying to reach. They're still breathing, but barely their breath, creating small clouds of vapor that dissipate quickly in the bitter air. Frost has formed on their exposed skin and their lips have turned blue with the cold that will kill them within hours if they're not rescued immediately. But even in their extremity, their faces wear expressions of peace that suggest they believe they've achieved something important, some form of transcendence that justifies the cost they're paying. Kyle opens his eyes as you approach, and for a moment his gaze holds perfect clarity, as if the cold has burned away the fog of his visions and returned him temporarily to the world of practical concerns and immediate dangers. "We heard singing," he whispers, his voice barely audible above the wind that cuts through the forest like a blade of ice. "The trees were singing us home, calling us to join the eternal dance of consciousness that connects all living things. We couldn't resist the call." The rescue is desperate and exhausting, requiring the combined effort of half your tribe to carry 3 people on the edge of death back to the cave through snow that reaches waist-deep in places and wind that can disorient even experienced travelers within moments of beginning a journey. It takes hours of careful work to restore warmth to their frozen limbs, to coax their spirits back from whatever distant realm had called to them in the night. The process involves not just physical treatment, warm stones and herbal preparations, forcing life-sustaining broth between blue lips, but emotional and spiritual intervention to reconnect them with the will to survive in the physical world. As you work over their still forms, applying everything your people know about treating exposure and hypothermia, the full scope of the crisis becomes undeniably clear. This isn't about individual choices anymore or personal freedom to explore consciousness. It's about the survival of your entire band, about whether the wisdom that has kept your people alive for countless generations can compete with the seductive pull of pharmaceutical transcendence. The near death of 3 community members serves as a shock that penetrates even the most committed advocates of plant-based consciousness exploration. The sight of Kale's frost-blackened fingers, of Zara's blue-tinged skin, of Jorik's labored breathing creates a moment of clarity that cuts through all the philosophical justifications and spiritual rationalizations that have been used to defend increasingly dangerous behavior. Uruk himself, still deep in his shamanic trance, but shaken by the concrete evidence of where his teachings have led, seems momentarily uncertain about the visions that have guided him for weeks. His usually confident pronouncements falter as he contemplates the gap between the transcendent realm he's been exploring and the practical world where people die from cold and exposure. "The moon god," he begins, then stops, his usually confident voice wavering with uncertainty that reveals cracks in the elaborate belief system he's constructed around his mushroom-induced visions. Mina, whose healing skills have been pushed to their limits by the winter's casualties, speaks with the authority of someone who has seen too much suffering in too short a time, someone who understands that genuine wisdom must include practical knowledge about how to stay alive in a dangerous world. "The moon god values life," she says firmly, her hands steady as she tends to Jorik's frostbitten feet with the skill and dedication that have made her the most trusted healer your people have ever known. She would not call her children to freeze in the forest. What called them was not divine wisdom, but the confusion of minds that have lost their way in a labyrinth of chemical delusion. Her words carry weight because they come from experience from decades of working with both medicinal plants and the people who use them. She has seen the difference between healing and harm, between wisdom and delusion, between spiritual insight and chemical intoxication that masquerades as enlightenment. The conversation that follows is the most serious your tribe has ever held, a fundamental examination of what it means to be human, to live in community, to balance individual experience with collective survival. It's not a debate about resource allocation or hunting strategies, but a deep consideration of questions that go to the heart of human nature and the proper relationship between consciousness and the physical world that sustains it. Grom speaks first, his voice heavy with the responsibility of leadership and the weight of decisions that will determine whether your people survive to see another spring. We have learned something important these past months, he says, his words measured and careful. But we have also learned that knowledge can be dangerous if we don't balance it with wisdom about how to use it safely. The discussion that develops reveals the complexity of the situation your tribe faces. The consciousness-altering plants will not be banned entirely. That much becomes clear as the conversation continues. They have revealed too much, taught too much, opened too many doors to possibilities that exist beyond ordinary awareness for complete prohibition to be realistic or even desirable. But their use will be carefully regulated, surrounded with ceremonies and restrictions designed to honor their power while protecting the community from their dangers. The insights they provide will be valued, but only when integrated with practical wisdom about survival and community responsibility. Uruk gradually returning to something resembling his former self as the immediate crisis focuses his attention on the world. Beyond his visions, agrees to serve as guardian of the sacred plants. But this will be a different kind of shamanism, one that emphasizes preparation, integration, and responsibility, rather than endless consumption and disconnection from practical life. The spirits speak through these teachers. He acknowledges his voice carrying new humility born from witnessing the consequences of his earlier certainty, but they speak to guide us in this world, not to call us away from it. Wisdom lies not in escaping from reality, but in understanding it more deeply, in seeing the connections that exist within the physical world, rather than seeking to transcend it entirely. The new protocols that emerge from this crisis represent a hard-won balance between the human hunger for transcendent experience and the practical requirements of survival in a dangerous world. The consciousness-altering plants will be used only during specific ceremonies with careful preparation and experienced guidance, and always with the understanding that the insights they provide must be integrated into practical life rather than used to escape from it. People who wish to explore altered states of consciousness will be required to demonstrate their commitment to community responsibilities before being granted access to the sacred plants. The experiences themselves will be carefully structured to maximize the likelihood of genuine insight while minimizing the risks of addiction delusion or disconnection from practical reality. Most importantly, the community has learned to distinguish between authentic spiritual insight and chemical dependency disguised as enlightenment. The near disaster of the winter has taught your people that genuine wisdom includes understanding the limits of any single approach to knowledge, including the knowledge that consciousness-altering plants can provide. The seasons turn, as they always have, as they always will, following patterns that existed long before humans learned to alter their consciousness, and that will continue long after the lessons of this winter have been integrated into the accumulated wisdom of your people. Spring returns to your valley with the gentle insistence of melting snow and the first green shoots pushing through the dark earth with a determination that speaks of life's endless capacity for renewal and recovery. The near disaster of winter has passed into memory, becoming one of those stories that your people will tell around fires for generations to come, a tale of discovery and danger, of the thin line between transcendence and destruction, of the hard-won wisdom that comes from learning to balance human curiosity with human responsibility. You wake this morning to the sound of birdsong that seems more complex and beautiful than you remember from previous springs, as if your tribe's experiences with consciousness-altering plants have enhanced your ability to perceive the subtle harmonies that exist in the natural world. The whisper of wind through new leaves carries scents of flowering trees and rich earth that speak of abundance returning to the land after the long months of scarcity and cold. The cave that sheltered your people through the darkest months feels larger now, its entrance framing a world transformed by warmth and renewal. The oppressive weight of winter survival has lifted, replaced by the lighter rhythms of spring and summer that allow for exploration, creativity, and the kind of philosophical reflection that prosperity makes possible. The fire that burns at the heart of your community is smaller now, a cooking fire rather than the massive blaze needed for winter survival. But its light still dances with the same ancient patterns that have comforted human beings since the first spark was struck from stone. The flames no longer carry the desperate importance they held during the cold months, but they remain central to your community's daily life and social organization. Your tribe has found a new rhythm, a way of living that honors both the practical wisdom of survival and the transcendent insights offered by the consciousness-altering plants. The balance isn't perfect, no human arrangement ever is, but it represents a sustainable approach to the eternal tension between the desire for extraordinary experience and the need for ordinary responsibility. The mushroom's leaves and grass are still used, but sparingly, ceremonially, with the kind of respect reserved for powerful medicine that can heal or harm depending on how it's approached. Their consumption is surrounded by rituals that emphasize preparation, intention, and integration rather than escape or endless repetition of transcendent experiences. Uruk sits near the fire this morning, but he's no longer the wild-eyed prophet who nearly led your people into disaster during the darkest months of winter. His shamanic authority has been tempered by humility, his visionary experiences grounded in responsibility to the community that depends on his guidance. When he speaks of spirit communications, now his words carry practical wisdom alongside mystical insight. The plants taught us that consciousness is vast, he says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won understanding, but they also taught us that vastness without direction is chaos. True wisdom lies not in experiencing altered consciousness, but in integrating those experiences with the knowledge needed to live well in the physical world. Mina tends her healing garden with renewed appreciation for the delicate balance required to work safely with powerful plants. Her knowledge has deepened through the winter's experiences, enriched by direct observation of both the benefits and dangers that consciousness-altering substances can bring, but so has her respect for the boundaries that separate medicine from poison, insight from delusion, helpful guidance from dangerous seduction. Young Kyle, fully recovered from his winter ordeal and bearing no visible scars from his encounter with hypothermia, works nearby with the focused attention of someone who has learned the difference between authentic and false transcendence. His curiosity remains strong, but it's now balanced by wisdom earned through suffering, understanding purchased with near-death experience. The morning air carries sense of new growth and fresh possibilities, the eternal promise of renewal that comes with each turning of the seasons. Your people have survived not just the physical challenges of winter, but the spiritual challenges of learning to work with forces beyond their previous understanding. The survival isn't just physical, but cultural, representing the successful integration of new knowledge with ancient wisdom. You stretch in the warming sunlight, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles put to honest work, the work of rebuilding, replanting, preparing for the abundance that spring always brings to those who have survived to greet it. Your tribe is smaller than it was last autumn, marked by loss and hardship, but also stronger in ways that aren't immediately visible to casual observation. The plant teachers remain part of your people's life, but they are no longer masters, demanding constant attention and endless consumption. They are allies now, consulted with respect, but not worshipped, valued for their gifts, but not permitted to override the fundamental wisdom that has kept human communities alive through countless generations of challenge and change. As you settle into the rhythm of a new day, a new season, a new chapter, in your people's long story, you carry with you the understanding that consciousness is indeed vast and mysterious, full of territories that ordinary awareness cannot map or explore. but you also carry the knowledge that those territories are meant to be visited, not inhabited, that the purpose of transcendence is to bring insights back to the world of practical life, where they can serve the flourishing of communities and the continuation of the great human story. The cave paintings that your people create this spring will include new images, representations of the glowing mushrooms, the talking leaves, the mysterious grass that open doorways to altered consciousness. But these images will be surrounded by traditional depictions of hunting and gathering family life and seasonal celebrations, the eternal activities that connect your people to the long chain of human existence. The fire burns steadily at the heart of your cave, its light, a reminder that some things remain constant, even as everything changes. And in that constancy you find the peace that comes from understanding your place in the vast web of existence, neither purely spiritual nor purely material, but beautifully, complexly, sustainably human. The morning stretches ahead, full of promise and work, and the quiet satisfaction of people who have learned to balance wisdom with wonder, transcendence with responsibility, the call of the infinite with the demands of life itself. Your tribe's discovery of consciousness-altering plants has not transformed them into spiritual beings, free from earthly concerns, but into more fully human beings who understand both their limitations and their possibilities. The plant teachers continue to grow in their sacred groves, offering their gifts to those who approach them with proper preparation and respect. But they no longer call to your people with the irresistible voice of false promise. They have become part of the natural world that your tribe inhabits, useful allies in the ongoing project of being human, rather than escape routes from the responsibilities and joys that define human existence. The story that began with Grok's impulsive consumption of a glowing mushroom has evolved into something larger and more complex, a tale of learning to live wisely with powerful forces that can enhance human consciousness, but that can also lead to destruction if approached without wisdom, preparation, and respect for their true nature. Sleep well, knowing that some stories have endings that are also beginnings, that some discoveries lead not away from home, but deeper into its true meaning. The consciousness-altering plants that your ancestors discovered are still available to those who seek them, but they are approached now with the wisdom that comes from understanding both their gifts and their dangers. The ancient oak that shelters the mushroom grove stands as it has for centuries, its roots deep in the earth and its branches reaching toward the sky, a living symbol of the balance between transcendence and grounding that your people have learned to maintain. In its shade, the glowing fungi continue their mysterious existence, patient teachers waiting for humans who are ready to learn not just how to alter consciousness, but how to integrate those alterations with the ongoing project of living well on Earth. The eternal rhythms of day and night season and year birth and death continue their dance around and through your small community, providing the stable framework within which innovation and discovery can occur safely. Your people have learned that consciousness exploration, like all human activities, finds its meaning and value only within the context of lives lived in relationship with others and with the natural world that sustains all existence. The fire burns low now, its flames settling into the gentle glow that will warm your people through another peaceful night. The consciousness-altering plants rest in their containers, available but not urgently needed, powerful allies that have found their proper place in a life that includes but is not defined by the experiences they provide. Sweet dreams carry you into sleep, dreams perhaps enhanced by the subtle residue of plant teachers that remain in your people's consciousness, but dreams grounded in the solid reality of community survival and the ongoing human story that your small tribe continues to write with each day of successful life in a world both beautiful and dangerous, both material and magical, both practical and mysterious, beyond all human understanding.